Have you ever stayed silent in a group because you were afraid your English wasn't good enough? Do you dream of speaking confidently in public, but something always holds you back? Hello, my name is Angelina. I want to tell you something personal, something that used to make my stomach twist and my hands shake. I'm talking about speaking English in public. If you've ever felt nervous, frozen, or even embarrassed just trying to speak up in front of others, then you're not alone. That was me every single time. But I changed. And I want to share with you exactly how I did it, step by step, so you can do it too. I still remember that morning like it happened just yesterday. I was sitting in the third row of my college classroom wearing my blue hoodie, clutching a pen so tightly that the plastic almost cracked. It was my first semester in Chicago, and even though I had been in the United States for a few months already, I had managed to avoid speaking English in front of a group. I thought I could fly under the radar, stay invisible, just listen and nod. But that day, everything changed. Our professor, Dr. Daniels, stood in front of the room with a relaxed smile and said, "Okay, folks, quick intros, just your name, where you're from, and one fun fact about you." A simple task for most, right? But for me, it felt like being asked to jump off a cliff without a parachute. One by one, students around the room started speaking. "Hi, I'm James. I'm from Texas. I play the guitar. Hey, I'm Priya from California. I love hiking." They were confident, casual, like talking was as easy as breathing. And then it was my turn. Daniels looked right at me and nodded gently. "Go ahead." My stomach dropped. My hands got sweaty. I stood up slowly and faced the class. 30 pairs of eyes stared at me. My mouth opened and nothing came out. I felt heat rush to my face and my throat closed up. I forced myself to say something. Anything. "Hi, I'm Angelina. I am from Brazil." My voice cracked on the last word. Then silence. I forgot the fun fact part completely. People weren't laughing, but they weren't sure what to do either. The professor gave me a kind smile and said, "Thank you, Angelina," and moved on. But inside I was crushed. My brain started racing. That was awful. I sounded stupid. Why couldn't I just say it right? Why did I freeze like that? I sat down and avoided everyone's eyes. I kept nodding through the rest of the intros, pretending like I was fine, but inside, I was breaking. I thought about getting up and leaving. I thought about skipping the next class. I even thought about dropping the course. But I didn't. I stayed in that seat until class ended. And that was the beginning of something I didn't know yet. A change that would shape me forever. After class, I walked down the hallway slowly. Everyone else seemed busy, chatting with friends or checking their phones. I found a bench near the vending machine and sat there for a while. I pulled out my phone and Googled how to stop being scared to speak English in front of people. Hundreds of articles popped up. Tips, tricks, YouTube videos, motivational speeches. But I didn't want fluff. I wanted something real. I wanted to know how people like me, people with real fear, actually overcame it. I clicked on a video of a woman sharing her journey with public speaking in English. She said something that stuck with me. The only way to stop being afraid is to do the thing you're afraid of, again and again. That hit me. I couldn't just study grammar, memorize words, or watch shows with subtitles forever. If I wanted to speak English confidently in public, I had to actually do it. Out loud, in front of people. I had to speak even when my voice shook. Especially when my voice shook. That evening, instead of hiding, I made a small promise to myself. I will not run away anymore. I knew I needed a space to practice, somewhere safe, but also real. That's when I remembered something I had heard from another international student during orientation. Toastmasters. I barely knew what it was, but I searched it up and found out there was a club just 10 minutes away from campus. They met every Thursday evening, and they welcomed all levels of speakers. I signed up immediately, not knowing what to expect, just knowing that I needed to take that first step. Thursday came faster than I thought. My heart was racing again. I almost didn't go. I almost made an excuse, telling myself I was tired or had homework, but I pushed through. I walked to the community center where the meeting was held, my legs feeling like jelly the entire way. When I walked into the room, I was surprised. It wasn't a big, scary crowd, just 10 people sitting in a circle. Friendly faces, warm smiles. I introduced myself to the person next to me. "Hi, I'm Angelina. I'm new." My voice still trembled, but the woman smiled and said, "Welcome, you're gonna love it here." That night, I didn't speak during the main part of the meeting. I watched and listened. People stood up and shared stories, answered quick questions, gave speeches. Some were great speakers. Others made mistakes, stumbled, even forgot their lines. But no one laughed at them. No one judged. Everyone clapped. It felt like a family. At the end of the meeting, the host asked if any newcomers wanted to say a few words. My heart jumped. My brain screamed, "Don't do it!" But I raised my hand. I stood up and said, "Hi, my name is Angelina. This is my first time. I'm nervous, but I want to learn to speak English better. In front of people." That's all I said. But the room clapped like I had just given a TED Talk, and I felt something shift inside me. Something small, but powerful. I went back the next week, and the week after that. Each time I spoke a little more. A sentence here, a short answer there. I participated in their table topics, where you have to speak for 1 minute on a random subject. My hands still shook, my voice still cracked, but I was showing up. And every time I did, I was getting stronger. My confidence wasn't growing in big, loud moments. It was building quietly, brick by brick. Speaking in public didn't mean giving perfect speeches. For me, it meant not hiding anymore. It meant choosing to use my voice, even when I was scared. One day after a meeting, a fellow member told me, "You're really improving. You speak with more clarity now." I smiled and said, "Thank you. I still feel nervous." He laughed and said, "That's okay. Even native speakers get nervous. But you don't quit. That's what matters." That meant everything to me. Still, something inside me knew that Toastmasters wasn't enough. I couldn't limit my practice to once a week. Real life was happening every day, and I was still avoiding speaking in other public situations, at stores, on the bus, even in casual social gatherings. I was waiting for the right moment, the safe space. But I realized if I really wanted to speak English in public naturally and confidently, I had to make every day my practice space, not just Thursday nights. I needed to stop treating public speaking like an event and start treating it like a lifestyle. That's when I decided to expand my comfort zone beyond that one room. I told myself, Angelina, if you can speak in front of 10 strangers in a community center, you can say a sentence at a coffee shop, you can ask a question at the library, you can talk to someone at the park. I had already faced the hardest part, the fear of freezing, the fear of failure, and I had survived it. So now, it was time to take what I was learning and bring it into the real world, one small step at a time. After a few months of attending Toastmasters meetings, I noticed something strange. I was becoming more comfortable giving short speeches in that little room every Thursday night. I was slowly getting used to standing in front of a small audience and sharing my thoughts in English. But outside that room, I still felt stuck. I still froze when I had to speak English at the grocery store. I still panicked when someone said hi to me in line at the post office. It didn't make sense at first. Why could I speak during a prepared session in Toastmasters, but still feel so uncomfortable in daily life? The truth hit me during one of our club's evaluation sessions. A member said, public speaking isn't just on a stage. It happens every time you speak in front of others, even if it's just one person. That one sentence flipped a switch in my mind. I realized I had been waiting for big public moments to prove myself, but I was ignoring the small public spaces that were all around me every single day. That weekend, I decided to test this idea. On Saturday morning, I made a plan. I would go to 3 places where I'd normally avoid speaking and use each one as an opportunity to practice English. Not as a performer, not as a student, but as a real person in the real world. I started at a coffee shop near my apartment. It was a cozy little place with wood floors, brick walls, and indie music playing in the background. Normally, I'd walk in, point at the menu, or just say, "1 coffee, please," and avoid eye contact. But this time, I stood in line, took a deep breath, and told myself, you're going to say a full sentence. You're going to speak like you belong here. When I reached the counter, the barista smiled and said, "Hi there. What can I get started for you today?" I paused for a second, feeling the pressure build up. But then I smiled back and said clearly, "Hi, could I please get a medium caramel latte with oat milk?" The words came out smoothly. She typed it in and said, "Of course. Anything else?" I shook my head. "That's it. Thank you." It was a short exchange, but when I stepped away from the counter, I felt like I had just won a gold medal. I wasn't perfect. My accent was still there, but I had spoken without freezing. That was a huge win for me. Later that day, I went to a nearby bookstore. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I just wanted to challenge myself. I picked up a couple of books, browsed the shelves, and then approached one of the staff members. My heart started racing again. I reminded myself, "Angelina, you already did this once today. You can do it again." I walked up and said, "Hi, do you have any books about improving public speaking skills?" She nodded and walked me to a shelf in the self-help section. "Right here?" she said. "This one's really popular." I thanked her and started flipping through the pages. She lingered for a second and then asked, "Are you preparing for a speech or something?" I hesitated, but then I said, "Not exactly. I'm just trying to get more comfortable speaking English in public." She smiled and said, "Well, you're doing great already. It's brave to work on something like that." Her words warmed my heart. It was a small interaction, but it made a big impact. I walked out of that store not just with a book, but with a little more confidence. The next day, I challenged myself again, this time at the farmer's market. I love going there on weekends, but I usually avoid conversations. This time, I approached a stand selling honey and homemade jams. The vendor, a cheerful older man, said, "Morning, want to try a sample?" I took a deep breath and responded, "Sure, what's your best-selling flavor?" He grinned and said, "Strawberry lavender. It's a little sweet, a little fancy." I laughed and replied, "I'll take a jar of fancy." He chuckled and handed me one. As I paid, I added, "I'm trying to get better at speaking English, so I'm making myself talk to people more." He gave me a thumbs up and said, "You're doing just fine. Keep it up." That quick back and forth, that moment of genuine human connection, meant the world to me. These weren't speeches. These weren't rehearsed. But they were real. And they were exactly the kind of practice I needed. After a few weeks of doing this, I began to notice how different kinds of public spaces made me feel. In quiet places like bookstores and libraries, I could take my time. In busier places like coffee shops and grocery stores, I had to think on my feet. Both situations taught me something. I learned how to speak clearly, how to adjust my pace, and how to stop obsessing over every tiny mistake. I stopped worrying so much about grammar. I focused more on getting my message across. One time, I accidentally said, "I take one banana" instead of "I'll take one banana." The cashier smiled and understood me anyway. That moment reminded me, communication is more important than perfection. I also started talking to people in my apartment building. Before this, I would avoid conversations in the elevator, pretending to be on my phone or looking at the floor. But one evening, I saw a neighbor I'd seen many times before, and I forced myself to speak first. "Hi, I think we live on the same floor. I'm Angelina." She looked surprised but smiled. "Yes, I'm Maya. Nice to finally meet you." We talked for a few minutes about the building, the laundry room schedule, and then laughed about how the elevator always gets stuck on the 3rd floor. It felt like a tiny breakthrough. It wasn't just about practicing English. It was about becoming part of the community around me. I even challenged myself in places I never thought I could. One time, I was at the DMV to renew my state ID. The woman at the counter asked me a few questions, and instead of just nodding or giving yes or no answers, I tried to speak with full sentences. "Yes, I live at that address, and I've been there for about a year now." She nodded and processed my papers. Simple stuff, but for me, it was powerful. Every time I opened my mouth, I was training my brain, my tongue, and my courage. It wasn't always easy. Some days I felt too tired or too anxious. There were moments when I messed up, forgot words, or said the wrong thing. One time I was trying to ask for brown rice at a food truck and accidentally asked for round mice. The guy stared at me for a second, and then we both burst out laughing. I corrected myself immediately, and he said, "No worries, that made my day." I laughed too, and the tension disappeared. Moments like that reminded me that language is also about connection, humor, and grace. People aren't out to judge you. Most of the time, they're just happy you're trying. As I practiced more in small public places, I began to feel less like an outsider. I started feeling like I belonged. I wasn't just the girl with the accent anymore. I was Angelina, the friendly neighbor, the woman who always orders caramel lattes, the regular at the Saturday farmers market. I started building tiny relationships with the people I spoke to. The barista started remembering my order. The bookstore clerk asked if I liked the last book she recommended. These small moments added up. They made me feel human. They made me feel seen. Something else began to change too. I noticed that I was starting to speak without thinking first in my native language. My thoughts were beginning to form directly in English. I wasn't translating word for word in my head anymore. That freed up so much brain space and allowed me to speak more naturally. The fear of public speaking wasn't just about language. It was about feeling like I had to be perfect. But now, I was starting to embrace imperfection. I was starting to trust myself. One day, I was walking past a church that had a sign saying, "Community Open Mic Night, Share Your Story." I stopped and stared at it for a long moment. 6 months ago, I would have walked right by it. But that night, I went in. I didn't go to speak, I went to listen. But halfway through the evening, they opened the mic to the audience, and I raised my hand. My heart was pounding as I walked up to the microphone. But I wasn't the same Angelina who had frozen in class. I had grown stronger, not because of one big moment, but because of dozens of small ones. I stood there, took a deep breath, and said, "Hi, I'm Angelina. I moved to the US last year, and I used to be terrified of speaking in public. But I started by saying hi to my neighbor, asking for coffee, and talking to strangers at the farmer's market. And slowly, I found my voice again." The room clapped. I smiled. I wasn't shaking this time. I was standing tall. That moment didn't come from one big leap. It came from small, steady steps. Every time I spoke in public, even if it was just one sentence, I built a part of myself back up. I practiced in elevators, coffee shops, grocery stores, libraries, bus stops, bookstores, parking lots, and even at the laundromat. And all of those places taught me one thing. You don't need a stage to speak in public, you just need courage to speak where you are. But as I kept going, I realized there was still one area I hadn't touched yet: real community involvement. Not just being polite in public, but truly being part of something. I wasn't just trying to speak English anymore. I was trying to live in it. And that meant speaking up in places where I had a voice. Not just as a learner, but as a participant. I had to stop playing small. I had to start getting involved. After that open mic night, something inside me shifted. Standing in front of strangers and sharing a part of myself, even just a short story, was a moment I'll never forget. It felt different than Toastmasters. It felt different than practicing at coffee shops or bookstores. This was real connection, and I could feel the power of it in my chest long after I left the church that evening. I walked home with my heart still beating fast, but not from fear. This time, it was excitement. A spark had been lit. I had taken my small, quiet practice moments and turned them into something that made me feel alive. That night, lying in bed, I realized something deeper. I didn't just want to speak English in public to fit in or sound fluent. I wanted to belong. I wanted to be part of the world around me. I didn't just want to talk, I wanted to participate. And that meant stepping into my community. The very next week, I started searching online for local groups I could join. Something outside of school, something that would force me to use English naturally while being around people who shared common goals. I came across a flyer for a local food bank looking for volunteers on Saturday mornings. It was close to my neighborhood and no experience was needed. I signed up without thinking too much, just following that new voice inside me that whispered, "Keep going." That Saturday, I showed up in jeans and a hoodie, nervous but determined. I expected to spend the morning quietly packing boxes or handing out cans of food. What I didn't expect was how much talking would be involved. People were greeting each other, chatting as they worked, giving instructions, laughing together. It was loud, lively, and full of energy, and I was right in the middle of it. At first, I felt out of place. My instinct was to stay quiet and follow the others. But then someone tapped me on the shoulder, a woman in her 50s wearing a bright yellow apron and a big smile. "Hey there! First time volunteering?" I nodded. "Yes, my name's Angelina." She smiled again. "I'm Carol. I've been doing this for a while. You're gonna love it here." She walked me through the tasks and introduced me to the others. One by one, I met people, students, retired folks, young professionals, all there to help. And they all spoke to me like I was one of them. They didn't care about my accent. They didn't care if I made small mistakes. They just appreciated that I showed up and wanted to help. That morning, I packed food, handed out bags, chatted with the people who came to pick up meals, and even shared a few laughs with other volunteers. I left tired, but proud. That one morning gave me more speaking practice than a week of studying. I went back every Saturday after that. It became part of my routine. And slowly, those small conversations started to add up. One day, Carol asked if I could help check people in at the front table. That meant greeting people, asking their names, explaining the pickup process. My heart skipped a beat when she asked, but I said yes. I sat behind the folding table, took a deep breath, and started saying, "Hi, welcome. Can I get your name, please?" Over and over. At first, I stumbled. I got nervous. I forgot how to explain certain things. But after an hour, it became natural. I started smiling more, making small talk. One man even said, "You've got a good energy. You make this feel less like charity and more like a community." That comment almost brought tears to my eyes. Not because of the compliment, but because I finally felt like I belonged. From that point on, I made it my mission to find more ways to engage with people, not just speak around them. I joined a community garden project that met on Sundays. The group was diverse, people from different backgrounds, ages, and professions. We planted vegetables, pulled weeds, built raised beds, and we talked. We talked about food, weather, weekend plans, funny stories. I had to describe what I was doing, ask questions about tools, and participate in group discussions. It wasn't always easy. Sometimes I still had to search for the right word or repeat myself, but I was learning more in these casual conversations than I ever had in any textbook. And more than that, I was making friends. At the garden, I met a woman named Rachel who worked at a nearby community center. One day, she told me they were starting a storytelling circle, a place for people to share personal stories in a supportive, informal environment. "You'd be great at it," she said. I laughed and shook my head, thinking, "Me? I barely spoke English out loud a year ago." But she encouraged me to come. The next Wednesday evening, I walked into a room with string lights, folding chairs, and a circle of people drinking tea and swapping stories. I didn't plan to speak. I just wanted to observe. But when the host asked if anyone new wanted to share, something in me rose up. I raised my hand, stood up, and said, "Hi, I'm Angelina. I'm from Brazil. A year ago, I was afraid to order coffee in English, but something changed when I stopped chasing perfection and started connecting with people. I don't have a fancy story, but I have a real one." I told them about the first time I froze in class, about Toastmasters, about ordering coffee, about the food bank, about finding my voice piece by piece. When I finished, the room clapped. Not because it was a performance, but because they felt it. They saw me. That night, several people came up to me and said things like, "I totally get that," or "I'm still working on speaking in front of others too." I wasn't alone. That night didn't just give me confidence, it gave me community. Soon I found myself being invited to more community events. A local school was hosting a cultural day and asked if I'd share a bit about Brazilian traditions. A neighborhood group asked if I could help organize a multicultural potluck dinner. I said yes to everything, not because I wasn't scared, but because I had learned how to speak even while feeling scared. Every new situation was another chance to speak in public, not perfectly, but truthfully, authentically. I even joined a local book club. At first, I just listened, but as the weeks passed, I started sharing my thoughts. I realized that even if I didn't have all the perfect vocabulary, I still had ideas worth hearing. I stopped apologizing for my English. I stopped saying, "Sorry if this sounds weird." I started owning my space in the room, and people respected that. They respected me. The more I spoke in my community, the less afraid I became of judgment. I started to see speaking not as a performance, but as a gift. When I spoke, I gave people a piece of my experience, my culture, my heart. I wasn't just a language learner anymore. I was a communicator, a participant, a neighbor, a friend. Eventually, someone from the community center invited me to be a guest speaker at a New Americans event, a local gathering for immigrants and international students adjusting to life in the U.S. My first reaction was panic. Speak to a crowd? Me? But then I remembered how far I'd come. I remembered how I used to shake just asking for help at the grocery store. I remembered that scared girl in the college classroom who could barely say, "I am from Brazil." And I said yes. The night of the event, I stood at the front of a modest hall, microphone in hand. Maybe 50 people were in the room, some new to the country, some community leaders, some just curious listeners. I told them my story. I didn't read from a script, I just talked, like I would to a friend. I talked about fear, about practice, about using small moments to build big confidence. I ended my talk by saying, "Your voice matters, even if it shakes. Don't wait until you feel ready. Speak now. Speak where you are." The room was silent for a moment. Then came the applause, and this time, I didn't feel nervous. I felt proud. That night, a young woman from Guatemala came up to me and said, "Thank you. I've been afraid to speak in public too, but now I want to try." That's when I knew finding your voice isn't just for you, it's for the people who need to hear it. Speaking English in public used to terrify me. Now, it empowers me. I didn't find confidence overnight. I found it by showing up, speaking up, and staying in the room. even when it felt uncomfortable. I didn't need to speak perfectly, I just needed to be present. And in showing up again and again, I didn't just become a better English speaker. I became a stronger version of myself. And as I look back at every step of the way, from freezing in class, to practicing in coffee shops, to speaking at community events, I can say this with confidence. I found my voice in the places I once tried to avoid.